Hi everyone, it's Daisy here and we are doing a nib study today. I know we've been doing a lot of nib log videos. Today's video is going to be on the Pilot Posting Nib. So it's a little bit of a specialty nib from Pilot as part of Pilot's custom series, which we'll talk more about. So today's video is going to be specifically looking at the posting nib and just kind of discussing what makes the posting nib special and comparing a couple of the different posting nibs that Pilot has to some other fountain pen nibs that are in the same family. So Pilot's posting nib is one of Pilot's 16 custom nibs. So in the custom series, you probably have heard, if you've watched our videos before, Pilot has lots of different custom fountain pens. They have the custom 74, the custom 823, the 743, and there's lots of other custom pens, and all of these numbers are different fountain pens. And among all of these different fountain pens with different numbers across them, there are actually 16 different total nib sizes, and some of them are with bigger nibs and some of them are with smaller nibs. And one of these different 16 different nib sizes is the posting nib. Now, the whole story behind Pilot's custom series, which started in 1971, was introduced by Pilot. The whole idea is that among Pilot's custom series, you'll be able to find the perfect fountain pen and the perfect nib for you, because there are probably 10 or so different bodies and 16 different possible nibs with lots of different nib sizes. So across all those fountain pens, across all those nibs, 16 nibs, and across all the different nib sizes, bigger or smaller nibs, there's the number 5 nib, the number 10, the number 15, and even further beyond that. All of these different combinations, there's probably like hundreds of different combinations of unique fountain pen plus nib plus size of nib. So there's kind of a pen for everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how you write with your pen, whether you like to write really small or whether you like to write really big, whether you like to write with very fountain pen friendly paper or not. Whether you write in English or in Chinese. So all of these different variations of Pilot customers can find their perfect pen among one of Pilot's custom fountain pens, and there are 16 different nib sizes. So of course, in these 16 different nib sizes, you have like your standard nib sizes, you have your extra fine, you have your fine, medium, broad, double broads, you have your soft nibs, and then you have kind of more unique specialty nibs that are for a very specific type of writer. So examples of these specialty nibs include stub nib and music nib, course nib, there's the Waverly nib, we've done videos on the Falcon nib, and then today's video is going to be on the posting nib. So for those of you who don't know, Pilot's posting nib is basically, you can think of it as just a very, very, very fine needlepoint nib. It's probably most often compared to the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine, which is like a degree finer than extra fine. So we have here today a bunch of pens on our tray here. And these are some of our finest pens, not the TWSBI. I just have the TWSBI here for kind of like a standard reference. But we have the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine, we have the posting nibs, and we have a Pilot Kakuno Extra Fine as well. So this is kind of like the family of extra fine nibs that we will compare the posting nib to today. The posting nib is found on 3 different Pilot custom pens. So it's on the custom 743, it's on the custom 742, and it's on the custom 912. Not all of these nibs and nib sizes are available options in the US, but in Japan, Pilot really has like a wide selection of nibs on their different fountain pens within the custom series. So if you decide decide after watching today's video that the posting nib is the one for you, then you can look on the 743, the 742, and the custom 912. So what else makes the posting nib so special? It's that ultra extra fine needlepoint tip. So if you like to write really, really small, if you write really, really neatly, and you use maybe a tiny grid notebook, then the posting nib might be the one for you. And it's actually really, for anybody who uses fountain pens, if you have tried using a fountain pen on a non-fountain pen friendly notebook, such as just like printer paper in your office, you'll probably have found that your fountain pen, the lines appear thicker than when you write in another type of paper, and that's because of feathering. So the ink actually is absorbed right away by the paper, and it kind of just thickens. So writing with a posting nib or writing with an ultra extra fine nib or needlepoint nib really is supposed to reduce that feathering and kind of allow you to write with various different types of paper, and you don't have to be super concerned about only using fountain pen friendly paper in an expensive notebook. You'll be able to write and take notes in any kind of regular standard office paper. So that's kind of what the posting nib is all about. So today I have prepared one of my favorite notebooks. This is the Life Kleid notebook, and it has a tiny, you can see some of my notes from doing testing of these pens earlier, and kind of tell how small these pens write. So we'll be writing a little bit with the posting nib and some of the other nibs that I want to compare with and see side by side, just so you guys can get a sense of what the posting nib really looks like, what it offers, and how it's different from its kind of contenders. Or you know, if you're considering a posting nib, you're probably also thinking about the ultra extra fine in the platinum collection. You're also thinking about maybe some other really fine pens. So I thought I'd do a little side by side. So this is a 2mm grid. I'm starting off the posting nib with the custom 912 posting nib, and we'll do a close-up of the nib. We'll do a close-up of the nib here. You can see the shape of the nib is very, very unique. It's actually downturned. Usually the nib is flat, but in this case, with the posting nib, in order to achieve that ultra extra fine needlepoint tip, Pilot has actually curved the nib, which is different from some of the other nib shapes that we usually see, and certainly different from any other Pilot custom nib. So this is the 912. The 912 has a Pilot number 10 nib. It is that is speaking to the size of the nib itself. It's not speaking to the size of the line width at all. For that, we use the terms extra fine, fine, medium, broad. But when we say number 10 nib, that is speaking to the actual size of the whole nib. I'm gonna be writing in the grid here, just to see how well this does in the actual grid. So this is the Pilot Custom 912. Okay, so I just wrote Pilot Custom 912 posting, did some figure eights, and I did these little lines to see, just like, we're gonna eyeball at the end, like which nib size that we've compared really gives us the most lines, and to see if there is like a noticeable difference in actually how fine these pens are. So that's the Custom 912, It's interesting. Also, it's interesting writing and getting used to writing with a curved nib like that. It's unusual, and it actually makes the nib feel a lot stiffer. Because it's curved like that, you can kind of imagine that if you're pushing down on the nib at all, because it's curved downward, even if you're pushing down and applying any kind of pressure at all, there's really like very little flex ability, and there's like practically no softness at all, especially in this number 10 nib. So it is a really, really stiff and definitely a very, very fine nib that you're seeing on the posting nib of the Custom 912. And I mean, it is really pleasing to be able to see that you're writing in that 2mm though. Like, I've never been able to do that before. Okay, so next up, we are going to try out the Custom 743. So the 912 here is with the flat tops. You see they both have their posting stickers, so these are pretty much like brand new pens out of the box. The 912 is different from the 743, even though they both are available in posting nibs. The 912 has a flat top, and the 743 has this cigar shape here. And then the 743 also has the larger number 15 nib. So when you hear larger nib, you should always be thinking a softer nib and a wetter nib, which is going to be interesting when it comes to this posting nib. You know, we'll get to see how much softer the posting nib can even be, because that was really a very stiff posting nib for the 912. Okay, so the 743 posting nib is still really, really fine, which is, I guess, it's kind of like what you expect and what you get when you are getting a posting nib. I will say it is noticeably smoother, and to try the Custom 912 and then the 743 posting nib, you can really, really feel the difference in that sort of that wetness. You get more ink flow in the 743, which if you're going for a really, really fine pen, that might be something that you're actually not looking for, because you do get a little bit, probably just like ever so slightly a broader line because of that wetter ink flow. So judging from my eyes, just looking at them, it's like a little bit darker, and the line is a little bit thicker just because of the wetter ink flow. But I did think it was softer, and I found it a little bit more pleasant to write with. Okay. Now I'm going to compare these with the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine, because I think that a lot of comparisons will always be made between Pilot's posting nib and Platinum's Ultra Extra Fine nib. I'd like to see kind of like what feels different. The Platinum nib is not curved, so Platinum's nib is actually like very flat. I would say it's flatter than a normal nib. Like it is a plateau, and I want to know if that makes the Platinum nib feel softer or stiffer. I feel like usually Platinum's nibs feel stiffer than other Pilot nibs, but I don't know how the Ultra Extra Fine will compare to the curved shape of the posting nibs. Okay, interesting. I think it's hard to tell. There they are up close. I think that the difference is very, very, very hard to tell, but the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine might be ever so slightly thicker. Like the lines appear to be just a little bit darker than you get with the Pilots. I think if you compare the 912 posting up here versus the 3776 Century Ultra Extra Fine, you'll see a very clear difference. But the difference between the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine and the 743 posting are a little bit closer together because you do have that extra softness with the 743. Platinum's nib is actually quite stiff as well. So I think the 743 is the softest, and then it's kind of a toss-up between the Ultra Extra Fine Platinum and the 912 posting nib. But the 912 posting and the Ultra Extra Fine Platinum are really, really quite similar. I'd have to spend more time with these to really be able to tell. I brought actually one other very fine pen that I always recommend in store for people who love to write fine. And this is not a gold nib pen. The other pens that we were testing are 14 karat gold nib pens. This here is simply the Pilot Kakuno, which you can get for like $14 or $15. It's a steel nib by Pilot, but it is one of the finest pens, and if you are in the market for a very, very fine fountain pen, if you write really small, then I actually recommend starting with the Pilot Kakuno. And I want to see how it holds up, how it compares to these really fancy gold nib pens. I want to see if it's actually a little bit thicker or if it's just as fine. Because to get a fountain pen to be this fine and also not feel like you're scratching a nail, a chalkboard, is it's difficult. So let's see. That did pretty well, actually. The Kakuno, I would say, is thicker. Like you can see it here in these figure eights, how it really fills up the 2mm grid. And you can't see it in as much detail as you can with the 912 posting. But it's actually a really good contender for these fancy gold nib, very fine pens. So it holds its own. But where it feels very different is when you do apply a little bit of pressure. All of the gold nibs really have this like bounciness to them because gold is such a soft material. Even with these very, very smooth fountain pens, like it widens a little bit when you press down and then it just bounces and springs right back. Whereas the steel nib, when you press down on it, it doesn't feel like it's bouncing back as much. So it's not as fun. It's definitely not as soft. You can press down on it, it will respond. It does make wider lines, but it just might not spring back as much as a gold nib would. So it's not as pleasant to write with if you do want to see a little bit of wetness in the nib. Other than that, it does actually do very well in a fineness test if all you're after is fineness. Yeah, of course, the Kakuno is not going to last you for years and years and years as these other gold nib pens would. It's just not, the plastic is a lot flimsier and it's a very light fountain pen, but it's a good start if you are just thinking about a fine fountain pen. last but not least, I did just want to throw in a TWSBI Diamond. This is a TWSBI Diamond Mini Extra Fine, and it's actually my own pen. I just wanted to write a few lines with this TWSBI Extra Fine, because if you're comparing fine pens, I feel like you need to see a normal pen to just see actually how fine these pens are. So I'll go ahead and write a few lines with the TWSBI Extra Fine just to really demonstrate how different it will be. Okay, so I also had like a different ink inked up in here, but this is really just to show you can really see the difference. You know, if you do write small, one of the reasons why you want a very fine pen is because if you write small with just a regular old pen like this, your letters start to really squish together and it really diminishes and impacts the legibility of what you're seeing. So when you look at what I wrote here, TWSBI Diamond EF, it's a lot less legible than the Pilot Custom 912 Posting and all of these others with a very, very fine nibbed fountain pen. So, and like this is still an extra fine, right? So this is still a TWSBI extra fine, but you can just see you really don't get the same fineness that you get with these posting nibs, the ultra extra fine nib, and even the Kakuno extra fine nib. So this, I hope, really goes to show that no two fines or extra fines are the same. And that's why it's important to look at our niblog videos. So here's our little writing sample, and yeah, I do hope that this was helpful for you. It was definitely interesting for me to try these posting nibs side by side and compare with the Ultra Extra Fine Pilot nib and the Kakuno Extra Fine. I will share also that personally, I don't use extra fine fountain pens, but our team member Gordon does. And something that we talked about is kind of the angle that you're writing. So if you do write really high at like a perpendicular angle like this to the paper, if this is you, you hold your pen way up here versus somebody who holds their pen down here and more at a 45-degree angle to the paper. Gordon is somebody who does that, who writes his pen very high and holds it at like more of a 90-degree angle to the paper. He was saying that he prefers the 743 posting because it does feel a little bit softer, and it almost like with the 912 posting, because of how stiff it is, it almost feels like you're like really scratching the paper. It feels like you're really fighting the angle of the paper. So I hope that makes sense. When he said that to me, I thought that was really insightful. And if anybody holds your pen like Gordon, that little tidbit might be interesting to you. Other than that, I think the 912 posting is the thinnest, and followed by the 743 posting, which is just a little bit wetter, and the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine, which is very comparable to the 743 posting, I would say. I did also, I mentioned our nib logs. We've done previous videos featuring nib logs, and I did kind of just want to show what these pens look like on our nib logs, just for you guys who really do like a numerical, empirical, is that what it's called? Like empirical evidence. So this is a previous nib log that we did with the custom 743 extra fine nib, and you can see that we had given it a 0.3 millimeter thickness. So just for comparison, I wanted to also compare side by side a Pilot Custom 743 posting with the extra fine to see if it's actually finer. And if you look at these side by side, you can see that they are very visually different. you can see like the lines on the writing sample appear a lot thinner on the posting nib, so it actually is like much thinner than the extra fine nib. So I gave it a 0.1. It also is really much drier. There's not as much ink smearage with the posting versus the extra fine, and the softness testing was also like, it was nowhere near as soft as the extra fine because of that curve. So these are just really stiff nibs in general. That being said, the 743 posting is softer than the 912 posting, which was very stiff, and it almost like dictated the way that you would write with it. Like if you are somebody who's a little bit more heavy-handed with your writing, these posting nibs kind of just don't allow you to press down on them because they are so stiff. Like it would just tire your hand out if you were applying that much pressure on a posting nib for like 10 minutes of writing. So it really requires a very light touch, or you'll get very tired, or you might really mess up the pen also. So that's about it. Other than that, the 743 posting and the 912 posting were really similar in their line width. I gave them both a 0.1. I'd say the only real difference between the two posting nibs is their wetness, and the wetness didn't really impact the line width too much. It just kind of impacted the darkness of the ink and the darkness of the line afterwards. I think that's about it for this video. I hope you all found it very helpful. I certainly have never written this much with a posting or like an extra fine before, because I usually go for a fine or like a medium fine. I've even been going to the mediums these days. But this is my notebook. It's a Kleid 2mm grid. I've talked about it many times. I love the 2mm grid, and I've never dreamed of writing in the 2mm grid, but I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do it. And now I feel like I want to just write tiny with these extra fine pens because it's so cute. It looks so good. I can't take credit for that. That's Ashley's handwriting. She wrote a little bit in this too. But yeah, these pens are fun if you write really small, if you want to write on, just office paper that might feather with a medium pen, then the posting nib might be the one for you. And I think I've covered everything about the posting nib. Let me know if I missed anything. Thank you all for watching, and let us know if you have any questions in the comments about the posting nib. Thank you. Bye.